So what's the best way to keep students awake after lunch?
Interactive. Moving around.
Moving around, that's exactly what we're going to do. So some years ago, we started doing this activity, which we call circle reading. And that's what we're going to do here. I think we can do 12 individuals as opposed to groups, but if you had a classroom, I would say to, divide the students into 12 groups, and you'll see why we're saying that. And Vanessa's going to be passing out the text that we will read. I can do the first one.
Yes.
Okay. And you will, so once you get your card, you're gonna stand in a circle.
Thank you.
Or should we do that or just sit where we are?
Well, good if you could stand up there.
You want to stand? Yeah, stand up and so stand in kind of like a semicircle around the room. Does everybody have a card?
Okay, you have to be in order.
You don't have a card? Dawood, do you have a card?
Yes.
Can you give it to her?
Yes.
Okay, so you need to stand in numerical order.
Yes.
Are you? Is everybody in numerical order? 1, 2?
Then you'd have to. Oh, 5.
So what we will say to the students is when they're in the groups, because you have people who read at different levels. We always give them the card ahead of time. Let's discuss any vocabulary, words that you do not know. And all students don't have to read. If they're in a group, some of them can be acting out what the person is reading to give everybody a chance to participate at the level that they can. So has everybody read their card? You ready to begin? All right, so I'm going to start with the title. The Cairo, they said they can't hear. Okay, everybody. The Cairo woman's daughter.
There was a woman who lived by the river in Cairo, her stepmother and her 7-year-old daughter.
The woman loved Mary, and she gave her daughter into the care of a nun, who provided the girl through thorough religious instruction.
After her time with the nun, the daughter went blind. Her mother implored Mary to help. One night while sleeping, the woman saw a vision of Mary walking in the air above the river, accompanied by angels. Seeing this, the woman threw her daughter out the window and called for Mary to take her.
The angel brought the girl to Mary, who cured her blindness by touching her eyes.
The angel then returned the girl to her mother. At this moment, the woman woke up and cried out that her daughter had been cured. She and her stepmother welcomed the girl.
When the girl correctly identified the colors of different threads, they all rejoiced.
The woman celebrated Mary for the rest of her life.
The end. Thank you. And take your seat.
All right, so so there's a number of directions that a circle read can go. Like Ms. Brenda brought up earlier. Oh. So like she brought up earlier, it definitely helps to have the children be broken up, or the students, whatever age they may be, broken into groups so that they have the opportunity to decide what their various roles will be. And we know that setting groups even can go in different ways. We can decide for ourselves, there's going to be a narrator, a main actor, a this or that, however we want to set it up. But you can see that with each one of those cards, there was an action, there was a moment, there was something to be played out. Now, my profession includes, I told you all, I'm a list of a lot of things, right? But my work includes arts integration. So we can immediately see the opportunity for drama inside of this. So we look at whatever vocabulary words that we want to use. We look at what is the action that is happening and what does that mean for us? And you actually can allow each group to determine, and of course we walk around the room and check in with each one, but you can allow each group to determine how they're going to act that out or how they're going to express it. I saw a kid getting thrown out the window. I saw, right, I saw touching the eyes, you know, they can draw. They can, you know, have pictures that are giving imagery of what the story is telling. We can have lessons in advance that have to do with Ethiopian artistic aesthetic. And so how these things would be drawn, what the faces, what the features might be of a child, of an adult, of a mother, Mary with the halo. Let me not get into what we're supposed to talk about later, right? But but all of these things can be incorporated in something as what appears to be simple as this circle read of this particular story. But we can dramatize it. We can guide our students in dramatizing it by just giving just those little seeds of ideas for how they can use it, how they can take on the story in its telling. And another element of that is where we're talking a lot about the written tradition. This steps over into oral tradition. This steps over into how stories are told in ways that make it memorable, in ways that make it something that we can pass down, something that we will continue to know time, generation down to generation, whether it is written or not. There's so many different levels, so many different things, but I just wanted to jump in and share a couple of ideas that will hopefully spark something for you in ways that you can use the circle read to not only introduce the story or introduce a concept, but how we can expand out from that. What are some of the things that we can do? Is anything being sparked in the mind just now, even just by having everyone stand and get in order and things like that? Anything coming up for you all?
There's mobility, you get up, instead of you talking to me the whole time. Some kids are kind of steady. After 5 minutes, nothing registered. Maybe I'm on.
Yeah, attention span, kinesthetic learning,
Especially in some schools where classes may be from 10, like I have a class from 10 to 6.
Oh,
So I have to think of, and they're traveling from anatomy, coming to that class after lunch. So incorporating something like this, or even in the middle of the class during like a short break, so that they're not like going down. So I'm starting to brainstorm some ideas.
Yeah, and also like to get the kids to really focus, because it's a little different from rather than reading something. So if they kind of it becomes physical, they could you know, I guess connect to it more. And also it's a discipline helper also, because then that way once they sit down, they're less likely to get out of their seat with them, you know.
Sure.
I thought about our English language learners and how like this is a way that they can be included in the lesson and also learn some vocabulary as well. And it doesn't have to, the target words don't necessarily have to be like necessarily like higher concepts, but they can be things that they're going to be using academic language anyway. So.
Right, exactly. And it also offers us an opportunity as the teachers to take what the children are giving us and then send it back to them in that academic way. So the children are going to give us what they know, what they're going to give us their own perspective, their own experience, their own point of view. And then we can always feed back to them a little bit of what we want them to get out of it, right? But they have done that footwork. They have done the work of exploring the idea. And then they're primed. They're ready now with something that comes from them to receive what we actually intend to give them, and also to receive the seeds that we want to plant in terms of the mental work that they need to do to really understand and really unpack some of the ideas that are going on. So even if, man, something just jumped in my head, even if it was a blind sort of thing where the children don't know the whole story, they only know what they have on the card. They don't know what else is happening or what's going on around it. They can even take some time to predict, to just have, go ahead.
I was thinking about a creative writing assignment. If
Mhm.
you give them just that card, they can create the beginning and the ending of the story, just what you get, a variation.
Yeah, what could happen? What could that be about? Yeah.
I was thinking of creative ways to teach theory
Mm.
and in the form, like in telling stories or incorporating art. Where you have like whatever theoretical base within your profession, but how you can depict or express that through a creative mindset, where theory is very abstract, but you can make it more tangible, practical. Case study or through role play. And then I feel like the students will understand it better versus, okay, this theory assumes X, Y, and Z, then how do I apply this to this versus it's interwoven and they're receiving that firsthand. So I'm kind of curious.
Ooh, yes, yes. And that brings me to our older learners, our 12th grade and going into adult learners, and just some of the things that we take for granted where people are developmentally in their brain. And it's like, well, the older they get, the less we have to do the song and dance to get them to pay attention, and they're just expected to be disciplined. And that's not fair. I like jumping up and down, as you can see, right? Make me stand up, make me do something, make me think in a way that takes me out of just what's written on a page, and so it's applicable at so many different levels, and for just such a range of, like Ms. Brenda was saying, ability, and it is inclusive. It's an inclusive way to reach material and to have material to reach our students. So the circle read is definitely one that it just belongs in that toolkit. It should be there. It really should. Any questions or add-ons to that? Because we can move to the next.
Well, I think you perfectly set up Wendy's presentation, because we kind of skimmed the surface, and now she's going to dig a little bit deeper.
With the close.
Yeah, it's a little bit out of order in the agenda because Lucina has to return to work and she's doing a piece of it. And then Helen Bond will come after Wendy to do a little bit more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Part of the reason we're here is to learn from you all about how to use these things in teaching. So I'm really grateful for this. So I'm kind of going to do what I usually do in my class. And so we may have to think about how to adapt that. But so you all read, these guys were very clever. And what they took is the summary of the story. But in your handout, in the packet that you got, you have actually the full translation. It looks like this. It's about a page long. And what I'm going to ask you to do to start is just to read through it. You've got the basic plot, but if you want to read the whole story, I'll give you a few minutes to do that. I apologize to those of you online. I should have told you where you can read this on the PEMM website. If you want to go and open it now. Yeah. I think I might be able to do it. Okay. If you online can let me know if that works. It's the story about girls. We just read about them, or just heard about the mother-in-law. Okay. So these stories appear very simple, right? And sometimes when I hand them to students, I say, it seems like you can't say anything about it, right? You're just like, what's there? I don't know. It doesn't read like something you're used to. But that's because they're so rich and so dense that you have to really work to unpack them. So this particular story is very old. We find it in manuscripts from the 1400s, so not a recent story. It's very popular. Most likely it was composed in Egypt. So this is a good example of something that wasn't from Ethiopia, but from Egypt, you know, given the Nile and so on. So what are some things that we can say about this story? What are the things you notice about it? Yes.
Well, I noticed that everyone in this story seems to be female. Like, she's living with her mother-in-law, but there's no mention of a husband or a father-in-law. She's living with her daughter. The teacher is the nun, is a woman. I don't know that there's any gender to the angels, but Mary certainly is female.
Androgynous.
Yeah, it
sometimes,
seems
but-
like a very female story.
Absolutely. A really important thing to notice about this story is there are no men. All men are absent. What else do you guys notice?
The colors of red
Red,
and green.
red, white, and green. What
White
do you
and
do
green.
with it?
I'll ask students maybe where they're from, do they know about their flag? And then maybe they could go home and research. If they're from the United States, I said, no, before that, you know, because I've asked them what are the colors of this flag, but then I want you all to go home and research your genealogy.
Is there
And
a
I
red,
would
green, and
probably
white
want
flag?
to do that story around, I do those things around Thanksgiving and tie it up into family tree.
Nice. Okay.
But I
Good.
asked them what countries have those. colors.
Yeah.
And then
I mean, a lot of times when I'm talking with people, I'm just like, I don't know. Like, why do you guys think red, white, and green? Any theories?
white is for purity, I guess. Red is for blood and green is for pastures or.
Yeah, life or something.
Regular stuff.
One person said to me, red and green is for, you know, people who are colorblind cannot distinguish.
Oh, gosh.
And I'm like, well, theoretically, the idea of colorblindness was discovered fairly late. So did the Egyptians know about it or not know about it? Or is it not an important detail? I don't know. But one of the things I like to model in the classroom is that I don't know a lot of things, right? So I'm asking them, like, I don't have a good theory. Do you have a good theory about this? So the threads. What else do you guys notice? Yes.
I was wondering if the Nile maybe had some kind of special significance and it helps us place the story, but also if they take the time to note that the house was really close to the Nile and the Virgin Mary appeared over the Nile. So I just thought that was interesting and stood out to me.
Yeah, the detail about the water against the walls is such a lovely descriptive moment, right? Like usually in modern writing, novels are full of description, but in the past in folktales, there's very rarely any description. So you're like, you have to say, oh, that's really interesting to have this moment where they talk about it. I wonder a little bit about like water goddesses. I don't know, some allusion there maybe. Yeah.
This is not a poor household. You know, like they've got this house that probably is prime real estate because it's right on the Nile.
Uh-huh.
She can, you know, I'm just thinking, she can afford to
I love that.
send her daughter to be educated.
And
And they've got silk thread and ready in their house in multiple colors. So I'm thinking
Okay.
that this is not, like, these are not poor people that this story is about.
I like that you notice both that all the men are absent and that the household is not poor. Like, I would tend to kind of go the other direction. Well, they must be very poor, right? They must be suffering, but as you know, educating, having these goods in the house and so on. Nice, I like it.
But if this was way back then, dyes I don't think were cheap. So I think she would be right because you have to be able to buy dyes or no plants that can dye. So
After that, print, so each colors. So, alright. No, that, but I was thinking, that's how I was thinking about the colors, that they're colors that can.
Go ahead.
Just also wondering about the economics of the household and the you know, spinning and weaving are women's work in a lot of cases, so they might have had thread in their house. That might be a simple thing to find in a house.
Mhm. Yes.
I was thinking of that phrase, walk by faith and not by sight, or something like that. And literally, you know, even though the mother wept and she, you know, she mourned over her daughter not being able to see, she just said, okay, she took her daughter, threw her out the window, and said, okay, you know what? I trust in this, being, you know, and everything's gonna be okay. And, you know, and she came back, she was able to see.
Mhm.
But even the funny thing is also being, saying, using the word seeing, even though the daughter couldn't physically see, they said she still could see.
Yeah, what do you make of that? I don't really know what to do with it.
You know, I have to think about that because I know what I mean, but I can't say it right now, so I have to think about
Okay,
that.
good. Well, let's come back to that.
Do you think it's sight versus vision? Because it's vision that's beyond just the physical sight. And
It's more like on a spiritual level, like kind of like because if she read all the scriptures of David, or I'm sorry, the Psalms from David, she in other words, she knew the importance, or she knew, I guess, God maybe, or the divine mother,
Mhm.
and yeah, that's.
And then she came to
Yeah.
her in her dream, right? It's an entire dream,
Mhm.
right? And in her dreams, when she is told, your daughter can see. So the fact that in the dream, she's being spoken to, and she like automatically, right, this is Lady Mary, I need to give it to her, I need to act now. And then the fact that it's all happening in the dream, but I think it's more the communication, that's what I'm fascinated with. I dream a lot, and I'm always thinking of God to help me, guide me to understand what this dream is about. And a lot of times, it's foresight. I know what's about to happen, what happened, and it's just trusting my intuition. So when she trusted my intuition, and a dream she was spoken to, and what happens in the week, it's actually it's realized. But that movie for her where she could see, but she couldn't see.
Yeah.
That again, I really think that's more of an internal intuition. Than the mind.
I like that. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, to piggyback on what she was saying, I think it was more of the daughter's knowledge through, again, the Psalms of David, books of the prophet, all of those things. In addition to whatever her mother instilled on her, she had that knowledge, so it was knowledge equals vision versus knowledge equals physical sight. So she had that vision because of the knowledge versus I see.
Yeah.
Physical eyes.
Yeah. The devotion to knowledge weakens the body, but strengthens the sight and gives you insight. Yeah.
Insight, perception.
Yeah. Nice. What other things do people notice?
Well, I was just thinking about, I'm trying to not put myself, I'm Orthodox Christian, so I'm like trying to like get into that.
You don't have to,
know,
you
so,
can do
but,
it.
Like the Nile is the source of life, you know, at that time the Egyptians used to settle, you know, in Cairo, they used to settle along the line. Because of that's where they could grow plants and they could sow. There's like, okay, also like the spiritual part of that, you know, just a lot of things that's been spoken right there. But like living along the line was a thing for every, you know, the Nile River was a thing for the Egyptian, for the Cairo people because it was dry. So, and then also like so Mary, there's a lot of history with that. You know, how she go to Egypt and, you know, Ethiopia, like there's a lot of history in there. So, for you, but I'm very, it's fascinating to hear other people's perspective.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a mother-in-law here.
okay, yes, thank you. What
There's
about the
some
mother-in-law?
I mean, am I mistaken that, you know, I'm 76, so maybe things are happening that I'm not quite familiar with yet. So there's David and a mother-in-law. So I'm a feminist, yes, but there are two guys somewhere.
I mean, the mother-in-law, what does the mother-in-law do?
What did she do? Nothing. Did she do anything?
Have you gone crazy?
Yeah, I mean, she.
Like, be a little too on the nose for mother-in-laws, I'm saying.
Like she had
Well,
down
doesn't
there.
have insight and she can't see, like the mother.
But the mother-in-law is like, are you crazy? And no,
Yeah.
she is not crazy.
Yeah. But you see, maybe
Yes.
the mother-in-law had issues with the daughter-in-law. That's why she,
Have you gone crazy?
and that happens all the time. We have perfect mother-in-law.
Oh, I'm sorry, this one other line, I mean, again, like a double meaning, was it the third line? This woman saw everything through her window. So again, I'm thinking the eyes and then the spirit or the soul or something like that, so.
It's all these different ways of seeing.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. I'm sure you guys have other things. I was reading this story with Mahari Worku, who's one of our researchers and catalogers and knows is. And when he read this story, he said, wow. I'm like, what? He said, the girl's being educated. This is the modern reader. We don't notice that. But that was the first thing he noticed. Wow. And he said, not only is the girl being sent to be educated, there's an educated woman to teach her. It's systemic, right? And you're like, in Ethiopia, for the past 600 years, a girl going to church would regularly hear about a girl being educated. That did not happen in the US. That did not happen in Europe. There are lots of places where that didn't happen, right? But in Ethiopia, the tradition of literacy is bedrock. And you hear it in the story and from Egypt too. So that's the cultural thing that somebody else can bring, right? Like we read it, we have our insights, and that's really important. You have to value all of it. But one of the reasons I want to bring this story to you is to give you some insight from a different perspective. And that's the value to me for students as well. So in the back.
Now you're making me wonder even more if it's being done behind, you know, the scenes where the men are not around, and so now they might be out working, or I don't know, right, in this scenario, but how as women we kind of provide that environment to give to our daughter, maybe we didn't have, or to learn and educate behind the scenes. Maybe it's not culturally accepted. I know, you know, boys and girls are treated differently. So I'm wondering now if that's the reason why the men aren't around, and that's why the mother-in-law is now, you know, the knowledge or under the eyes or without my son. Just something.
Yes. Okay.
Just
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
maybe.
So I was wondering, just because I don't know anything really about Orthodoxy, I know that in Protestantism that being literate was considered spiritually important because you could interpret text for yourself versus in Catholicism, for example, where someone else is interpreting it for you. What is the role of literacy theologically within Orthodoxy?
One of the, I mean, Dawit would be probably better to answer, but one of the things I just want to point out to you is that they taught her the Psalms of David, and in Ethiopia, that's the first thing you learn as a little kid. So, okay, the biblical books of the prophets, those are 12 books, those are tough. This girl is not doing light reading, right? And then the testaments of the apostles, that's not in the, quote unquote Bible that most, like, say, Protestants read. That's like another 15 books. So not light reading. Not light reading. So, is it to know God or is it to know knowledge? Like, are you reading it to learn,
I guess I have an appreciation looking at persons with disabilities from
Yes.
the perspective that she's not being seen as any different, but is given the same opportunities. And even in her having to read these tougher books, it shows that when you raise the bar, people can raise up to the bar.
Yeah.
When they don't even know you've risen the bar, but
Yeah.
that's the element or the goal that you're going towards.
Yeah. I think the word disability, of course, we have to address the elephant in the room, right? Like, I mean, she throws the daughter out the window, right? It's in a dream, but she lost her sight and she got thrown away, right? Or also, I don't know, I just love this word, defenestrate. Have you guys ever heard that word? Fenestra in Latin is window. And so defenestrate, she was defenestrated. The mother defenestrated her.
What about the candle and the idea of light and dark and light and dark?
For the threads.
The mother-in-law and the mother, I thought they weren't friends, and that's prejudice. But they were friends in the end. I mean, they weren't enemies, but towards the end, they actually did the candle bit.
Yeah.
So they enlightened
Yeah.
the whole family about blindness, maybe.
Yeah.
That there's no, it shouldn't be a stigmatized
Yeah.
thing.
Well, and the mother-in-law is expressing the reader, right? They hear this and they're saying, "Are you crazy?" Right? The disbeliever, right? And the story says, "No, you should believe because she was healed," right? So you have to have the voice of the doubter expressed in the story to have it be, gone against.
But what about
right?
when they say if you lose one sense, you're better with the others? You think that it could have been to her disadvantage to see, because maybe she was more perceptive before when she didn't have one,
When she hadn't read.
when she was blind. They
Yes,
feel like when
she was more
when
perceptive when
somebody
she was blind. Yeah. One
Could
thing,
it be that literacy is good?
I
But
mean,
literacy can be bad.
a really common theme of a lot of ancient literature is people losing their sight because of all their reading, right? Like we have glasses now, you have surgery, we have all these things, but lots of people in the past, in fact, it would be, they have that old saw about movies. If you see a gun in the first act, it's going to be go off by the third act. It might be that here, if you see somebody reading a lot, you're going to that girl's going to go blind. You wait and see what happens. Yeah, see, that's what happens. So it's kind of a theme there, and a common theme. So it wouldn't be that surprising to the reader. I might say, well, it's all reading about all the male prophets and male apostles, maybe that's causing the problem, but that would be a very modern, whatever, take. About going back to the men, right? So when the mother goes to the window, she says to Mary, "Take her back. You gave me my daughter." And that's really interesting. She does not say, "Hey, God, hey, Jesus, hey, Holy Spirit. No, she says, hey, Mary, you gave me a blind daughter. And, you know, Dawid and I are always contesting about this. So you have to hear his opinion too, right? I'm like, Mary is the creator in the story. There is no intercession, right? The theological perspective on Mary is that she is an intercessor. Like in the cannibal story, she goes to Jesus and she begs Jesus, please forgive him, right? And there are lots of these stories that are like that. That is not this story. There is no Jesus, there's no God, there's no nothing except for this. You pray to Mary, Mary helps you, no intercession. She is the creator and she is the divinity. So in my experience, again, Dawit, you have to listen to him. This is really common in these stories. Mary's the only figure and you pray to her and that's it. And I always think that Protestantism is so, I grew up, you know, by the way, evangelical, right? It's so wimpy, right? There is no mother God in Protestantism. There is no woman that you go to for help. And I'm like, I don't know. That just does not seem to me to be a rich religion. And that in these traditions, lots of times she's the intercessor. And some of the time people pray to her and she does it for you. And she is the person. And I'm like, yeah.
Me thinking about something. Matriarch versus patriarch, because now it's like, you know, being that, you know, there's so many, and I'm learning this myself, there's more stories about Mary, and then what I have learned from different Christian religions is that Jesus is the main person in the story and Mary is like the secondary person. So this is very interesting.
She's really centered in a lot of these stories. And I think in a really powerful way. And also, which is also really common in these stories, is there's no, you know, fearful kind of reverence, right? Like she talks to her the way a daughter talks to a mother. It's intimate, it's impatient. It's like, what did you do to me, mom? You got to fix this kind of. And I think that's very powerful. I do think the thing about disability would have to come up, right? And that you might say that it has a kind of a negative view of disability, that the daughter's no longer useful, or, you know, a lot of times in disability studies, they're very anti-healing. The whole healing narrative, they say, is super problematic. People don't need to be healed. So, you know, when I look at this, but I'm like, well, but a child who cannot see, you're not in a wealthy household. You don't have public schools to help you out. Like, it's a burden. And especially if you have no men in your house, right? Like, how are you going to support yourself? How is this daughter going to go away and get married and, you know, provide other things? So I think it's true, but yeah. Please, no.
But along those lines, she doesn't give her daughter until she's sure she's married.
Yeah.
And so to me, that spoke of her belief in Mary.
Yeah.
That is when she tries to give her daughter. I wonder about the words specifically that are in here. Like, it makes me wonder about translation.
Yes. Yep.
But
It makes her sound entitled. That's what I thought at first. This makes her sound like, as if she had a promise. I go to Samuel with, I know, where she says to God, yeah, where she says, I'll give you just give me a child, right? That's where my mind went. It sounded like, well, she promised something, as if she was promised, and now she's like, oh, it's not what I expected. Take her back. What's going on here? That's where my head went. So along the line, not to help, but go ahead. That's what I, yeah, because that's what struck me. It's like, as if, you know, she was expecting or anticipating this sense of entitlement. But then again, it could be translation. Is it translation that's giving this tone?
Yeah. Yep. Good. Absolutely. You have to always think about that and always remind the students, right? It's translation. We don't know.
Can we
They
hear
start-
someone thinks about it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, if you want.
How did it feel?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So first, going to this question about literacy, I think for the Ethiopian, they're not like when we think of literacy, we're thinking of like it's good to read and like it's an important thing to know how to read. For the Ethiopian, they're thinking about they need to learn how to pray, and a lot of the prayers are in written down so they can memorize it. So the idea of learning, not for the concept of knowledge, but for the concept of prayer, and we were talking about this earlier, is there's this important literary work in Ethiopia from the 1950s, Fikar Eska Maqaber, Love Until Death. It's better translated as Till Death Do Us Part. And the main character in the story is a girl who's being taught how to read, and it's not hidden. It's very like out there in the literature, and the dad is the one who hires her a tutor, and the tutor is the one who like they get on fall in love and stuff like that. So and the community knows about it. It's not hidden. So again, you see this kind of acceptance, and she's learning, and the parents are like, you have to learn how to pray, right? So the reading is tied up with, at least in this case, with prayer. Going back to Mary and how we see Mary, and this is where we differ a little bit, is again from this text, this literary work. It's just a phenomenal body of work. So there's a story where like two villagers, right? Like the two men disagree, and men do what men do best. They fight, right? So and then it's like they're about to kill each other. They have their weapons. Like it's this beautiful thing. He writes a letter to him. Which weapon will you select? Because I will select one that matches, and they do this whole thing, and they set a date, they go. And on the day of battle, it happens to be the feast of St. George. So the priests come together and they beg him, please don't fight, don't fight, don't fight. And the main guy who's ready to fight, he's like, okay, I won't fight. And immediately they say, look at the miracle that St. George has done. They're the ones who've done this, right? Like they're the ones who agreed, like we won't fight, but this is a miracle that St. George performed in the mindset of the Ethiopian. So to me, in these stories, when let's say, if we just for a minute assume these stories did take place, for me, when we were dealing these stories, veracity is not a question. But if we think of it, so there's this girl, let's say she was healed for whatever way, you assign it to Mary, right? And they don't have a problem with it. This is what Mary did in my life, And going back to what you said, I like the she kind of expected it, entitled, I think is the word he used. Of course, because Mary provides, right? So it's like Mary provides. So you're like, come on, and just the last story, my mom used to tell me about her Sunday school teacher in the 80s, where in Ethiopian history, a lot of bad things were happening, people were dying. And she said her Sunday school teacher would go to the church and physically hit the church of St. Michael. St. Michael, why are you not down here? This is kind of like the perception and the attitude of Ethiopians, like, come right now, And if something good happens, if people didn't die, it's like, look at the miracle St. Michael did, right? So they don't see a problem with it in the way that they understand. So to me, they're not confusing or, with the role of God and St. Michael. You ascribe the miracles that happen, to the saints.
Yeah. We have to have Helen come, but I just wanted to say quickly two last things. And one is that I think this story is really profound about the burden of care.
Yes.
Are you, any of you caretakers? Like, it's not all fun and games. It's a burden, right? And you might dream of throwing this out, right? I'm like, yeah, this is what happens. You're exhausted. You want to return this to the divine. It came from you. Let it go back to you, right? And also because caretaking is about being immobile. You're trapped in the house and invisible inside the house, right? So this is to get out of that, you get into this kind of extreme mobility, you become visible. And I also have kind of this little thing of like, and maybe you want your child to fly. Well, so I think these stories are often really, really moving in that way. The last thing is just to say the threads. I'm like, is this the sting in the tail of the story? We started with a woman reading books and we end with a girl reading threads. Is that a devolution? Is that a women's work? And I'm like, well, one thing I don't know about this period is maybe women weren't sewers, right? There are lots of times when tailors were men. So I don't know how to interpret that, but I am open to the possibility that something. So, all right, thank you I love this story, so I'm happy to discuss it with you.